All right, guys, welcome to our study group. This is our second meeting, and we are recording. And we've got a good number of us here today. We've got several. It looks like we're about half of the group might be missing today. So I did hear from a couple of them that were not going to be able to make it today. So our presentation today is covering the user setup. Adam's going to take care of that one, as well as Alana. Did I say it right that time?
Yes, you did.
All right, very good. And then we'll also start getting into some of the security and access controls today. So we've got 3 topics. And Adam, I'm going to let you kick it off. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay.
And that should give you then the ability to share your presentation. Also, if you've got a presentation, I would like to be able to upload those to our shared folder as well. So that would be good if you can do that. Am I sharing? All right, I don't think I am sharing. So go ahead, Adam, and if you can, share your screen.
Are you able to see that now?
Yes.
All right. So today we're going to talk about setting up new users, and then we'll get into resetting passwords and unlocking accounts. So first step to set up a new user, when we're under setup in the quick find box, you can go ahead and just type in users. And this will take you to a list of your current users. And then you can go ahead and select new user, and it'll open up some general information where you can start typing in the information of the user. So let's do that. So once you type in the first and last name, the first thing you see is the alias gets pre-filled. That's just a short name to identify the user in places where the full name won't fit. It's the first letter of the first name followed by the first 4 letters of the last name. So we'll go down to the email now. And so once you fill in the email, that also pre-fills your username and then the nickname. So first, real quick on the nickname, that's just a name that's used throughout different Salesforce communities. That can be changed and updated to whatever you want it to be. But more importantly, for the username, a couple things. First, it needs to be unique across all Salesforce organizations. And it needs to be formatted as an email, but it doesn't need to be an actual real working email. But the biggest important part is that it's unique across all Salesforce organizations. You have the option, you can put in title information or department information. Over here on the right, we have roles, and what roles are, they determine what users can see in Salesforce based on where they're located in their hierarchy. So users at the top of the hierarchy can see all the data owned by users below them, and users at lower levels can't see data owned by users above them or in other branches. Roles are completely optional, but just keep in mind if you do use them, each user can only have 1 role. Next is your user license. It basically determines what baseline features a user can access. Again, each user can only have 1 standard user license. And for this user, we're going to choose a Salesforce license. Now, when we look at profiles, the profiles that are available to you are based upon what user license you select. So with the profiles, they're going to determine what users can do in Salesforce. They come with standard sets of permissions, which will grant them access to particular objects, fields, and records. Depending upon what edition of Salesforce you have, you can either just use the standard profiles that are pre-made, or you have the ability, you can make your custom profiles. For this user, we'll go ahead and select marketing user. You'll want to select a profile based on the user's job, whichever one fits best for them, or if you just need to make a whole custom profile for them in particular. And another reminder, don't give a user a profile with more access than the user needs to do their job. If they need more access, you can grant more items to the user needs with a permission set. You have an active checkbox. This could be an active user. And then down here, we get into what are called feature licenses. These entitle the user to access additional features that are not included with their standard license. Users can have multiple feature licenses. Since we have a marketing user, I'm going to go ahead and select the marketing user feature license. This gives them the ability to create, edit, and add members to a campaign. Down below, we have some accessibility options, some additional options that aren't required, call center information if they're working in a call center, their phone number extension. Beneath that, you have a mailing address if you want to input their mailing address, section to start the setup of single sign-on, and then their local settings as far as time and language. So we'll choose Central Time. And then lastly, we have approver settings. So if you have any approval processes in place, you can choose someone to basically receive that email also to do the approval for you if you're not available. Also, you can have it set up to where any approval process request is routed to your manager. Once you have everything completed, make sure that this checkbox down below is checked, so you can notify the new user. And then when you click save, it will send them a email with a link to where they can go ahead and log in for the first time and set their password. Once you have the user created, depending upon what else you need to do, once it's created, you have a bunch more options down here to assign different permission sets or any other options that you may need for your instance of Salesforce. The next part is resetting passwords. Again, you can find that if you're on the main screen of user setup. You can just check the box and then click reset password up here. Again, it will send a link to them where they can go ahead and reset their password, or you can do it if you actually click on the user. You have the reset password button there as well. Some things with resetting a password, users can request a link through the forgot password button on the sign in. They're able to do that up to 5 times within a 24-hour period. The one caveat to that is single sign-on users are not able to reset their own password. They'll have to reach out to their Salesforce administrator for help getting logged back in. And then the next part is unlocking accounts. Unfortunately, I don't have an example. I wasn't able to get one of the users locked out. But when a user is locked out and you go and look at their profile, you have another button here that allows you to unlock the account, and you're able to scroll down into their login history, and you can see where passwords have been locked out after so many failed login attempts. And when you click unlock password, again, that'll go ahead and send them the link to where they can reset it. If, for example, you have someone who's locked out of their account, but they also need to reset their password, if you just select reset password as well, that will unlock the account also. And that's all for user setup.
Awesome. Any questions for Adam?
Yeah, don't know if this is necessarily a question for Adam or maybe Terry or Carla or anybody. For the exam, do we need to know kind of the, I guess, basic access of the standard profiles?
I don't know. That'd be more for Terry or Carla.
I don't know if they went down that path, but again, I took this one almost 10 years ago, so I'm certain it has changed since I took it.
I don't think you have to memorize each standard profile's permissions, the permissions that are included in each of the standard profiles. I don't think that you have to get that granular. I don't think anybody knows that.
Yeah. Good question.
Yeah.
Other questions? If not,
I was just going to ask.
I have a question on single sign-on. And sorry if whoever interrupted. Sorry there. Is there any, like, we use single sign-on in our org? Is the test setup assuming that we're not doing single sign-on? Is there any questions on setting up single sign-on?
I don't think you're going to see questions about how to set up single sign-on on this particular exam. Again, I don't know the answer to that, but I wouldn't think that okay. To me is more of an advanced level question.
I would agree.
Yeah, I recently. Oh, go ahead, Carla.
Oh, I was just saying I would agree. I think you just have to know that it's possible.
Yeah.
I've taken the test three times this year so far because I'm not very good at testing, and never once was that question on there.
Good enough. Good
Thanks.
Enough. All right. If you want to stop sharing your screen, and Elena, are you able to share your screen and take us the rest of the way?
Okay, I shared. I have a PowerPoint that says user setup.
Yep, we see it.
Okay. And so I'm going to go through a PowerPoint versus a demo because there's more kind of consideration type things you need to think about, and otherwise it's pretty easy to activate, deactivate, and unfreeze folks. So that's what we're going to cover now. So for user setup, you do need the permission of manage users in order to activate, deactivate, and freeze your user accounts. And as you just saw Adam show you, you can access the user setup from setup, users, and then users again. As far as activating, so also as you just saw with Adam, upon creation of a new user, it is officially active. Actually, when you create the new user, you can't even uncheck active. So when you click save, it is officially an active user account. And of course, then they will have access to data based on whatever profile, roles, groups, permission sets, etc. that you assign to that user. When it comes to deactivation, so you cannot delete a user. The only thing you can do is deactivate them, which ensures that they cannot log into Salesforce anymore. When you deactivate them, they lose access to all of the records and are unable to log in. A couple things to consider prior to deactivating someone is consider whether you need to deactivate them or freeze them. And we'll get to freezing in a moment, but if you foresee that the user will need access to Salesforce again in the near future, you may consider freezing it rather than deactivating. Although you can reactivate an account that's been deactive, you would need to go through and just confirm that all of the original settings and access you applied to them were fully restored. So if you don't necessarily have someone leaving your organization, you may consider freezing rather than deactivating. In order to deactivate, one other thing to point out is 3 situations where you may not be able to immediately deactivate the person, and that's because they are selected in a custom hierarchy field, they are selected as the customer portal administrator, or they are the sole recipient of a workflow email alert. So if any of those three things are in place, you won't be able to deactivate them. Instead, you could freeze them, resolve these issues, and then go in and deactivate them. But once you're ready to deactivate, you simply edit the user, uncheck active. You're going to get an alert just informing you that you understand the implications of this, such as they're not going to be able to access data, and that you may consider transferring the records that they currently own. And after you uncheck active, then you can save these. Some considerations after you have deactivated them. So the user will continue to own records until you've changed the ownership of those records. So you should consider transferring them to a new owner. If you do, you will need the transfer record and or transfer lead permissions to transfer those records. Also, if you deactivate users in an organization where you have opportunity splitting enabled, they are not going to be removed from their assignment. I'm quite unfamiliar with how that all works, but that was a note in there, so I figured I would share for those that might utilize opportunity splitting or if that's part of the exam. And then the last thing to consider is while a deactivated user does not count towards the available licenses you have to assign to new users, it does not mean that it is reducing the number of licenses you are being billed for. So if you need to reduce that number after you've deactivated, then talk with your representative. So reactivating a deactive user account, again, you edit the user record, simply check active and save. And then just something to consider afterwards is you may want to confirm that all of the settings that they previously had were fully restored. And if they weren't, obviously put them into place. One example is access to a team or access to an account team. If they have read-write access prior to being deactivated, when you reactivate, they will have only read-only access. So freezing, this is used to temporarily suspend access to Salesforce. Some scenarios for this would be a user is on extended leave of absence and you don't want them to access during that time. Maybe you believe the user's account has been compromised. I personally have had to do it for HR type situations. Or as I'd mentioned before, if you're unable to deactivate immediately because they are selected in a custom hierarchy, are the customer portal administrator, or are the sole recipient of a workflow email alert. To freeze, you simply open the user record. So you don't edit it this time, you just open it up and you click the freeze button. Same concept to then unfreeze. That freeze button turns into an unfreeze button that you would click to then unfreeze. And some considerations for this is freezing a user does not make their license available. So you can't reassign it to a new user. You need to deactivate that user in order to reuse the license. And I found some prep questions for you all. So the first one, you are notified a user is going on leave for a few weeks and do not want him logging into Salesforce. What should you do?
Freeze it.
Freeze.
Nice job. Yes. I don't have the celebration from.
Yeah, right. We don't have the graffiti or whatever that was called. That's
yes.
Confetti.
Confetti, yes.
Confetti, that's the word, yes.
Okay, next one. You are notified a user is no longer employed by the company and needs deactivated. When it is deactivated, what happens to the associated license? Is it deleted, removed from the billable licenses, becomes available for reassignment, or is automatically assigned to another user?
We've got C, option C in the chat window.
I agree.
Yes.
Yeah.
More confetti.
Good, yep.
Okay, and last one. Oh, I was going to make this reveal for you all, but I guess just stay. Another review, what are 3 reasons why a user cannot be deactivated? Sorry for the lack of reveal there, but again, just custom hierarchy field, customer portal administrator, and sole recipient of a workflow email.
Yeah, good. Question on when you mark somebody, when you deactivate that user, does Salesforce prompt you to reassign records at that time?
It does not.
Does not. Okay.
The alert that you get tells you that you should consider transferring the records, but it doesn't immediately take you to the mass transfer page.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Very good.
Alana, did you see anything when you were doing research on this that stated anything about cases if you're trying to deactivate a user that's tied to a case?
Ooh. The only thing I did come across in my research that brought up cases was if they are associated to an account team. But I would assume based on the other research that they continue to own records even after they're deactivated. I would assume they continue to own cases, but I don't know if anybody else had the.
There's just some odd things around cases, and I don't know that I've hit this situation. I was just curious if you had seen anything about it.
Yeah, I did not see a specific item related.
If they are a default owner or workflow user, then those will, I'm pretty sure that you'll get an error message when you deactivate those.
Oh, like default owner of a case queue, you mean, Terry?
Yeah.
Okay.
I forget what they call it, but yeah, it's that. All right, any other questions related to users for either of our 2 presenters today? All right, hearing none. Let's see, I don't think our presenter for our next topic is here. So we are going to just do this as a group exercise and help each other get through it. Let me share my screen. So the topic is on security and access and explaining the security controls. Explain the various organization security controls, for example, passwords, IP restrictions, identity confirmation, network settings. So let me see if I can get us into an org here. All right, so let's look back at that one more time. Explain various security organization example passwords. We've done a lot of talking about passwords. What are some of our options as it relates to setting up passwords? Anybody have any thoughts on?
Well, you can have restrictions based upon how many alpha characters versus numerical characters versus special characters, and how many minimum that you require. And there's also items around complexity. Yep. Okay. There you go.
Yeah. So user passwords expire in a certain number of days, are set to never expire. Enforce the password history. So how many passwords will it remember? Wow, that's a lot. Passwords remembered. I don't remember it ever being that big before. I haven't looked at that one for a while. Yeah, Kevin, you mentioned the password length. Complexity is there as well. Password question requirement. Oh, I think that's the, isn't that when you set your password, doesn't it ask you a question or like to help you remember what it was or something to that effect.
Security question, something like that.
Yeah, let's check that one out real quick just to make sure we understand it. So we've got plenty of time here yet today. And password question requirement. So restrictions to place the password hint. Okay, that's the hint. Cannot contain the password, restricts the answer from containing the password. None makes no restriction on it. The setting is not available for self-service portals, customer portal, or partner portals. Okay. Things like this can sometimes, Salesforce's questions in general sometimes can have things like this that when you read the question is a clue to how the answer is going to turn out. So I don't know that this question will be on there, but I always, when I read those questions, I always look for things like that because that can sometimes dictate one answer is right versus another one. Minimum length requirements are here. Our lockout period. So after they've attempted to log in this case, 10 times, they would be locked out for 15 minutes.
And Terry, when it comes to the maximum amount of times before you're locked out, there was questions that what is the standard or what Salesforce would suggest being the amount, which was 3, I believe.
Yeah, I think that is likely true. I wonder if they say here. So lockout period, the default is 15. Yeah, they're not showing a minimum. When it comes to security, you're probably best off tighter is better. if all else fails. Obscure secret passwords for password resets. Secret answers for password resets. Anyone familiar with what that one's about? Oh, it's just showing the answer in plain text versus the dots that conceal it, it sounds like. Require a minimum of 1 day password lifetime. So what that one's about is if I change my password today, I will not be able to change it again later today. I've got to wait a full 24 hours before I'm able to reset my password again. Allow users to set password API for self resets. That sounds like a coding based question. So, so yeah, you could set your password via code if needed there. It looks like you have the ability to put a custom message and help link on the forgot password screen. And then as well for API users. API just means that it's a computer program that's talking to Salesforce. So it's some form of code involved communicating, code or another application that's communicating to Salesforce. Okay, so that's passwords. Anybody familiar with IP restrictions? Want to take a stab at that?
It restricts where users can log in to the Salesforce instance.
Yes, and can you use that? Where are your options to put an IP restriction? Maybe let me ask the question that way.
I believe you can do it in OWD and also on the user.
Okay, so let's look at users.
Security settings, I don't know.
Yeah, so if we look at a user record, we have, there's so many options on this thing, it's kind of crazy. Okay,
I think security settings, if I'm not
I'm
wrong.
not seeing it there. Yeah, I think you're right. It's called network access.
Network, yeah.
Yep,
That's
network access, you have it here. Okay, and there is one more place.
I think you can do a profile, can't you?
Profile, yep. Profile is your other option. Now, if you restricted it, I don't think you're going to get this question, but if you ever take the security and access exam, it will be on that one. Which one takes precedence over the other for profile-based IP versus network access?
I would assume network, Terry.
You would say network as the most restrictive. You won't have to know the answer to that, but yeah, no. If your network is set up to restrict it, it's going to by default restrict it at all of your profile levels. So an example where you might want to restrict at a profile level, I've seen some companies do this with their system admins, where because that admin user has such a high level of authorization within the org, they would restrict the IP addresses on their admins to be something that's within a set number of range. There are other ways to handle that same type of thing, but I have seen companies do that as well. And that's where you do it at the profile level. Any questions on IP restrictions? Or is everybody familiar with what an IP is? Do we need? Okay. All right.
I had one question on that. I think when you're putting it in there, it says like a range.
Yes.
I don't know how that works.
Yeah. So a lot of times it depends on what you're having to give access to. So another common one that I will use is for integrations. So if you've got other applications that are integrating in with Salesforce, a lot of times you'll whitelist or you'll put an address range in specifically for some of those, and so you just need to put in the range. So if I were to say what's my IP, so my IP address right now is this, and so if I wanted to restrict my access, I would just plug in the same number as my start and end. You want to be really careful about doing this because you can very quickly lock yourself out. So I am not going to say this because I know my IP changes. But in most corporate environments, you've got what we would call a static IP range that defines these numbers for you. And those will be unique across the world.
So Terry, I do have a quick question. I don't know if you have the answer for this, but I know in some situations I've seen this done where the range is limited so that users would, if they're working remotely, that they need to be using a VPN.
Yes.
So they can force traffic through different routes. But have you ever seen, does this range affect like a portal or a community? Have you ever seen, is that, I've never.
That's a good question. I don't think that it would. I don't know how we would be able to restrict an IP at a community level. It kind of would seem a little counterintuitive there. Now you could potentially, I wonder if we could do it at a profile. That's an interesting question. It won't be on your exam, but I'm curious. I'm curious if we have IP ranges here. And yeah, we do. So login IP ranges on a community as well. So I suppose the potential would be there.
Well, I was thinking that, it might be a situation too where, these communities can be specific to, a group of customers, and you might want for their security, in order to, fall in line with what they have for security concerns, to being able to restrict that. So I could see that from specific scenarios that we have here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you'd have to check me on this because I don't know this for certain, but I think IP ranges are also can be geographic based. So if you didn't want people from outside the US to have access, I won't query that, but my guess is I think that you could do that. So it just stays, again, that's going probably beyond what an admin cert question would ever be, but.
And community can also be an employee portal too. So if, they would need to probably restrict that if they wanted to have to do it on the community level.
Yeah, good point. Anyone want to cover identity confirmation? Anybody have any thoughts as to what that is talking about?
Does this have to do with when you get verification codes, Terry?
Yeah, I believe it does. So identity verification. I don't know that it's going to get into a lot of this level of detail, but just knowing that it's there and that you do have some control over this type of processes, I think is what you're looking at. So let's say that you wanted to, people could log into your org, but you wanted them to have to re-authenticate in order to run reports and dashboards. Then what you can do is raise that session to a high assurance, and that would require then a second factor of authentication in order to get to reports. In simple terms, that just means that you'll have to use something like the Salesforce Authenticator app that would prompt you with like it's either 4 to 6 digit code that you would plug in order to authenticate. So you see that a lot when you sign into computer systems. When you sign in for the first time, it will send you a code to verify. Banks are really good about doing that sort of thing, just to confirm that you really are who you say you are. They'll send you a text message or something to that effect. So yeah, I think that's what they're talking about here on this piece of it. And then we kind of already hit network settings when we talked about IP, but let's just look back again. Network access, I was just saying if there was anything else here that might be important. It's interesting, back when I took the admin test, the options that we had to know on this was nowhere close to the same level that they are today. So I think the lesson learned is always take certifications when those exams first come out, because you can guarantee that they're going to get more complex over time. But anyway, network access, that was where we saw those additional IP ranges. And then I believe we've got other people assigned for these 3 bullets. So yeah, so we've got Diana, Gina, and Jackie coming up next week to cover the rest of those security and access items. Any other questions from what we've talked about today?
Can you quickly tell about the 2-factor authentication? Is something like if I use the correct password and it'll go to someone else's for another verification?
Yeah, so 2-factor authentication, I forget where that's set up.
We just saw that in the...
Yeah, remind me, where did we see it? Identity?
Yes. Yeah, identity.
Yeah, and what I would expect on this exam is just to know that the capability is there. your easiest way to set up two-factor authentication with Salesforce is to use the Salesforce Authenticator app. That's just an app that you install onto your phone. That when you go to log into Salesforce, it will then send a notification to your phone that you'll click a button to approve your access into the phone. So two-factor, what that means is that you have to have something that you know, which would be like your password, and then something that you have, which is what your phone authenticator app then is doing. It's you're clicking on that to say, okay, I am who I say I am. Okay. And I used to have it set up in one of my orgs, but I don't now, so I'm not able to demo it for you real quickly. But you put your password in just like you always would, and then a screen will come up that will tell you that you need to authorize it off of your phone. And so then you'll get an alert on your phone that you can then click a button on there that says, I approve access. That communicates back to Salesforce, and then you are granted access into your org.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Good question.
Yeah, I get confused between two-factor and single sign-on.
Yeah, single sign-on just means that you're using your network or some other identity provider to manage your login passwords. So most of the time, that's going to be your network login and your
IP range.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're using, say, Microsoft, when you go into and sign into your computer in the morning at work, you're putting in a password, your username and password. Once you've what Salesforce can do with single sign-on is leverage that same password to grant access to Salesforce. So you don't have to, your users won't have to remember a specific username and password for Salesforce.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another very good question. And I'm sure it won't get into the details of how to set that up, but that is that in essence is probably all you would need to know, is that it's available. I can't actually show you that one if I log out here. So here you can see that I've got mine set up with Azure as a single sign-on option. So if I click that, you'll notice that I don't have a login name and password on that screen.
Oh.
So what that did is it went in and it checked, it used Microsoft or Office 365 to validate who I am. And so I didn't get prompted to put in a username and password because my computer already knows who I am.
Okay, it stores your ID and password and then automatically clicks.
Well, it doesn't technically store it. There's a little bit more detail behind how that works. There's a lot of moving pieces when you get into some of that, how the technology actually works. But it did actually verify that I am who I am, but it went out and checked that against Office 365's servers.
Is it something like a cookie setting?
No.
Okay.
No, there's a lot of complexity to how some of that works, but there's tokens that get shared, and there's a trust and relationship that you have to set up between Salesforce and your authenticator. So there's quite a bit to some of that. Again, I think all you're going to need to know is that you can do it.
Okay.
And know the advantages and disadvantages of some of that too. Might be reasonable to understand too.
Yeah, this single sign-on, for a person like me that's in like 4 different orgs is not wonderful. But if you have users that are always in just one org all the time, it's great for them because then they don't have to try to remember what their username is or their password.
Yeah. All right, guys. Any other questions before we shut it down for today?
I have a comment if there are no other questions.
Yes.
So I was chatting with a coworker about testing, and I don't remember how I found out about this. It might have been a Twitter thing, but in the web assessor criterion web assessor where you sign up for your exams, there is a practice exam that you can purchase for $20. So it's an official Salesforce practice exam, and I wanted to show where that's at. Can I share my screen?
Yeah.
Yep. So I logged into my web assessor account, and if you've never taken a test before, you're going to have to go into this web assessor and create an account, and then you can start scheduling your exams. And I'm sure we can go over that in one of our sessions too. If you've never done that, we can help out with that. But once you're logged into your assessor, you can go into register for an exam. And there is certified practice tests. So to take the actual exam, you'll go into this administrator, Salesforce certified administrator, and I've already taken it, so I can't do it. But there's a certified practice exam down here that if you wanted to register, it's $20, which I thought was kind of cool because, Focus on Force, there's some other resources that have practice exams, but they're not Salesforce backed. And this is a Salesforce backed practice exam that I wanted to show you. So
is that, how many questions are on that? Does it say?
It doesn't say. It gives you the opportunity to experience the environment, format, and level of questions you may see. It's unproctored. You can take it at your convenience. You do have a time limit. You do see the results upon submission, and you will receive percentage breakdowns so that you can see where your weaknesses are and focus your learning on that, which is really great.
Very cool. Yeah, that is very nice.
And you can re-register for the exam as many times as you want, which leads me to believe you probably have to pay the $20 every time. But at least then you can get a good idea of how it works.
Yeah, very good.
So I wanted to show that.
Nice. All right. So next week, Diana is going to kick us off with apply the security controls. And Gina, you'll be up. I think you're on the call today with custom profiles and permission sets. And then Jackie, I don't know if you were on today or not, but you've got secured folders. So if you guys have any questions on getting your presentations ready to go, just let us know. Let Carla or I know, and we'll try to give you some guidance there to help you get ready for the meeting. Otherwise, guys, thank you. And we will talk again next week.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.